My name is Natalie Harper. I'm 27 years old. Stop begging for attention. That's what my father said in front of 52 guests, standing beside a table covered in champagne glasses and a cake that didn't have my name on it, the week I graduated valedictorian. That same week, my parents hosted a celebration in our backyard with string lights, catered food, and a banner stretched across the fence. None of it was for me. I left home that night. I didn't come back for 9 years. Then my brother, the golden child, the one that party was actually for, called me at 12:47 a.m. from a gas station outside Phoenix, his voice shaking so badly I almost didn't recognize him. What he told me about our parents didn't just explain everything. It made me wish I had asked questions a long time ago. Before I go on, if this kind of story pulls you in, take a second to subscribe to Women Reddit Stories. And only if you mean it. Stories like this take time to tell, and I want to know who's really here listening. Now let me take you back to May, 9 years ago, to a quiet cul-de-sac in Chandler, Arizona, the week everything I thought I understood about my family started to unravel. I grew up in a beige 2-story house on Desert Willow Lane, the kind of neighborhood where every lawn was trimmed to the same height and every mailbox matched. From the outside, we looked like the kind of family people pointed to as an example. Mark and Elaine Harper. 2 kids. Clean driveway. Church on Sundays. My dad worked as a regional sales manager for a home security company. He believed in firm handshakes and eye contact and the idea that reputation was something you built carefully and protected at all costs. My mom stayed home, volunteered at church events, coordinated neighborhood potlucks, and kept everything in our lives looking exactly the way it was supposed to. And then there was my younger brother, Jason. Jason was everything people noticed. He was athletic, confident, the kind of person who could walk into a room and immediately start a conversation with anyone. He played varsity basketball, had a laugh that carried across the house, and teachers remembered his name even if they didn't remember the lesson they taught that day. I was different. I was quiet. I got straight A's, kept my head down, and spent most afternoons in my room studying or at the public library working part-time. I didn't cause problems. I didn't ask for much. I thought that was enough. I thought if I worked hard enough and stayed out of the way, eventually someone would notice. I was wrong. There's one memory I still go back to sometimes. I was 15. I had just made the honor roll again, 5th semester in a row. I printed out the certificate at school, brought it home, and taped it to the refrigerator right next to Jason's basketball team photo and his MVP ribbon. The next morning, it was gone. I found it later that afternoon folded neatly and placed on the kitchen counter underneath a stack of grocery coupons. I asked my mom about it. She didn't even turn around from the sink. She just said, "The fridge was getting cluttered, honey." Jason's photo stayed exactly where it was. At the time, I told myself it didn't matter. That it was just a piece of paper. But the truth is, that refrigerator was more than a place for magnets and photos. It was a scoreboard. And I was never allowed to win. By senior year, I had one goal. Valedictorian. Not because I wanted a speech or recognition or applause, but because I thought maybe, just maybe, that would finally be enough to make them look at me the way they looked at Jason. I took 6 AP classes. I studied until midnight most nights, sometimes later, hunched over my desk with a desk lamp and a notebook full of color-coded tabs. I worked weekends at the library to save money for college applications. I wrote essays between classes, revised them during lunch, and rewrote them again at night. None of it was loud. None of it was celebrated. But it mattered to me. The day I found out, I was sitting in the guidance counselor's office. She slid a letter across the desk and smiled in a way that felt different, like she knew this moment mattered more than most. "You earned the highest GPA in your class," she said. "You'll be giving the commencement speech." For a second, I just stared at the paper. Then I picked it up, and I swear everything around me felt sharper, brighter, like the world had shifted slightly into focus. I drove home with that letter sitting on the passenger seat, glancing at it at every stoplight just to make sure it was still real. I walked into the house, set it on the kitchen counter right in the center where no one could miss it, and waited. My dad came home first. He walked in, dropped his keys in the bowl, flipped through the mail, and placed it directly on top of the envelope without even noticing it. My mom came in 10 minutes later carrying grocery bags. "Mom," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "I got something today." She glanced at the counter. "What is it?" "I'm valedictorian. They want me to give the speech at graduation." She smiled, quick and polite. "Oh, that's nice, Natalie." Then she turned and started putting milk in the fridge. "Have you started writing your speech yet?" she added. "You should probably ask a teacher to help you." That was it. No hug. No pause. No real reaction. I stood there for a few seconds, waiting for something else to follow, but nothing did. So I nodded, picked up the letter, and went upstairs. I did ask a teacher for help. Mrs. Evelyn Carter, my AP English teacher. She was in her early 60s, sharp, observant, with short gray hair and reading glasses that rested on a thin silver chain around her neck. She read my speech after school one afternoon, sitting quietly at her desk while I waited across from her. When she finished, she didn't say much. She just looked at me over the top of her glasses, picked up her pen, and wrote a single sentence at the bottom of the page. "I'm proud of you." I didn't realize how much I would need that sentence later. Graduation week started on a Monday. That was the day the official valedictorian letter arrived in a thick cream envelope with the school seal pressed into the corner. I placed it on the kitchen counter again, this time propped carefully against the fruit bowl so it couldn't be ignored. Tuesday afternoon, Jason called home. He'd just been offered a full athletic scholarship to a Division I college. Within an hour, my mom had called half the neighborhood. I could hear her from upstairs, her voice bright and excited, repeating the same sentence over and over. Jason got a full ride. Can you believe it? By evening, my dad had ordered a banner online. White letters on a dark blue background, "Future Star Harper." By Wednesday, they had booked a caterer. By Friday, the backyard was transformed. String lights hung from the fence. Folding tables lined the patio. There were trays of food, stacks of plates, and a large cake sitting in the center with Jason's name written in bold icing. Saturday was the party. 52 people filled the yard, neighbors, relatives, church friends, people I barely knew but who all seemed to know exactly who Jason was. I got home from my shift at the library just after 4 p.m. I could hear the music before I even pulled into the driveway. I sat in my car for a minute, my graduation gown folded neatly in the back seat, and told myself to just go inside. Be supportive. Be happy for him. Maybe someone would ask about me. I walked in through the side gate. No one asked. I moved through the crowd quietly, smiling when people looked at me, nodding when someone mentioned Jason's scholarship, refilling chip bowls when they got low. At one point, I stepped into the kitchen to get a glass of water. And that's when I saw it. The valedictorian letter. Still on the counter. Exactly where I had left it. Except now it was partially covered by a stack of used paper plates, one of them damp, leaving a faint ring of condensation across the envelope. I picked it up slowly, brushing off the moisture with my thumb. The seal was slightly smudged. And something inside me shifted. I walked back outside, holding the letter in my hand, the noise of the party filling the air around me. This time, I wasn't going to stay quiet. I just didn't know yet how loud it was about to get. I stepped out onto the patio with the letter still in my hand, the paper slightly damp where the condensation had soaked through, and for a moment I just stood there, watching everything like I wasn't part of it. The string lights were already glowing even though the sun hadn't fully set. People were gathered in small circles, laughing, holding plastic cups, talking about Jason's future like it was already something larger than life. My dad stood near the grill, one hand on Jason's shoulder, explaining to someone how competitive the scholarship had been, how only a handful of students were selected each year. My mom moved between groups with a tray of drinks, smiling in that polished way she always did when people were watching. I walked toward her first. I touched her arm lightly, careful not to interrupt too abruptly. "Mom," I said quietly, "I have some news too." She turned toward me with that same quick smile she'd given me in the kitchen earlier. "What is it, honey?" I held up the envelope slightly. "I'm valedictorian. I'm giving the graduation speech on Monday." She blinked once, like she was trying to place what I'd just said into context, and then she nodded. "Oh, right. That's great, Natalie." Then she turned back to the guest beside her and continued pouring lemonade into a glass like the conversation had never happened. I stood there for a few seconds, the sound of ice clinking against plastic cups filling the silence where something else should have been. I told myself maybe she hadn't really heard me. Maybe I just needed to say it louder. So I did. This time, I raised my voice just enough for the small group around us to hear. "I'm giving the valedictorian speech at graduation on Monday." The shift in the yard was subtle at first. A couple of heads turned. Someone paused mid-sentence. A woman I recognized from church lowered her cup slightly and looked in my direction. Jason glanced over from the grill. My dad set his drink down. And then he looked directly at me. His expression didn't change much. No anger, no confusion, just a kind of calm irritation, like I had interrupted something that mattered more. "Natalie," he said, his voice even, controlled, carrying just far enough to be heard by more people than I was ready for, "stop begging for attention." It didn't feel loud, but it didn't need to be. It cut through everything. "Not everything is about you," he continued. "This is your brother's night." 52 people heard it. No one said a word. The silence that followed wasn't sudden, it spread slowly, like something sinking in. Conversations didn't stop all at once, but they thinned, shifted, softened into something quieter, more careful. The woman from church looked down at her drink. Someone near the fence cleared their throat. Jason let out a short, awkward laugh and turned back toward the grill, already re-engaging with someone beside him like it hadn't just happened. My mom didn't look at me at all. She picked up another cup and continued pouring. I stood there for maybe 10 seconds. Maybe less. Then I turned around and walked back through the kitchen. No one followed me. No one called my name. I stepped out the front door, crossed the driveway, and got into my car. The noise of the party was still there, muffled now by the walls of the house, distant but steady, like it belonged to a different world. I closed the door, but I didn't start the engine. I just sat there. The letter was still in my hand. The edge of it was bent slightly now where I had gripped it too tightly. The gold seal, once clean and sharp, was smeared just enough to look worn. I stared at it for a long time. I didn't cry right away. At first, it was just quiet. Then the realization settled in, not all at once, but piece by piece, like something I had always known but never fully allowed myself to understand. This wasn't new. This wasn't a one-time moment or a bad night or a misunderstanding. This was how it had always been. The refrigerator. The silence. The polite smiles. The way everything I did seemed to disappear the moment it entered that house. I had spent years thinking I just needed to try harder. Be better. Be quieter. Be more patient. But sitting there in that driveway, with the sound of laughter still drifting through the air behind me, I realized something I couldn't unlearn. There was nothing I could do to make them see me. Because they had already decided not to. That's when the tears came. Not loud, not dramatic. Just steady, quiet, the kind that doesn't ask for attention because it already knows it won't get it. I sat there for 15 minutes. Maybe longer. long enough for the sun to dip lower and the string lights to grow brighter. Long enough for the music to shift to something louder, something celebratory. Long enough for me to understand that if I stayed, nothing would change. So I made a decision. Right there in that driveway, holding a letter that should have meant everything. I would stop asking. I would stop waiting. And I would leave. Monday came faster than I expected. Graduation day. I got ready alone. I put on my cap and gown in my bedroom, adjusted the collar in the mirror, and smoothed out the fabric like it mattered. I checked my reflection twice, not because I was nervous about the speech, but because part of me still expected someone to walk in and say something. Congratulations. You did it. Something. But no one came. The house was quiet. Jason had left early with my parents. They had plans to meet some friends before the ceremony, something about taking pictures together at the stadium. No one had mentioned saving me a seat. I drove myself. The school auditorium was already filling up when I arrived. Families clustered in the rows, parents holding cameras, siblings shifting in their seats, people saving spots with jackets and programs. I stood near the entrance for a moment, scanning the room, looking for 4 empty seats that I had reserved under my last name. Row 5, center section. They were still empty. I walked past them and made my way backstage. The ceremony started on time. Names were called, applause rose and fell in waves, speeches from administrators blurred together in the way they always do. When it was my turn, they announced me with full formality. Valedictorian, Natalie Harper. I walked to the podium, the sound of applause filling the room, and for a brief second, I let myself feel it. 700 people. All of them clapping. I looked out over the crowd, and without meaning to, my eyes found row 5. Seats 7 through 10. Still empty. The applause faded. The microphone hummed softly as I adjusted it. And then I began. I spoke about perseverance. About showing up even when no one is watching. About doing the work because it matters, not because it gets recognized. I didn't write that speech to prove anything to my parents. But as I stood there, I realized I had written it for someone. Just not them. When I finished, the applause came again, louder this time, sustained, genuine. I stepped back from the podium, and that's when I saw her. Row 4, just off the center aisle. Mrs. Evelyn Carter. Standing. Clapping harder than anyone else in the room, her eyes bright behind her glasses, her posture straight, like she had been waiting for that moment just as much as I had. One person. But it was enough. After the ceremony, she found me near the exit, weaving through the crowd with surprising speed. She didn't say much when she reached me. She just handed me a small envelope, pale blue, my name written neatly across the front in her handwriting. "Open it later," she said. Then she squeezed my shoulder once and walked away. I stood there for a moment, the envelope in my hand, the noise of families reuniting all around me, and I realized something that felt both heavy and strangely clear. I wasn't going home. Not really. Not anymore. And I didn't know it yet, but the moment I walked out of that building alone, my parents had already started doing something that would follow me for years. Something I wouldn't discover until it had already shaped my life in ways I couldn't yet see. I opened the envelope from Mrs. Carter later that night, sitting on the edge of my bed with my cap and gown folded neatly beside me like they still meant something. Inside was a simple card. No long message, no paragraphs, just one line written in her careful, steady handwriting. "I'm proud of you. Remember this feeling." Behind the card was a business card for a scholarship coordinator at Arizona State University. I stared at it for a long time. That was the moment everything shifted. Not loudly, not dramatically, but quietly, in a way that felt permanent. 3 weeks later, I packed 2 suitcases, loaded them into my car, and left Desert Willow Lane without telling my parents where I was going. I didn't leave a note. I didn't call. I just drove. The house got smaller in my rearview mirror until it disappeared completely, and with it, the version of myself that kept waiting to be chosen. Arizona State became my new beginning. I moved into a shared apartment just off campus with 2 roommates I found through a bulletin board listing. The place smelled faintly like cleaning supplies and old carpet, and the air conditioner rattled loudly every time it kicked on, but it was mine. For the first time, I could close a door and know that what happened inside that space belongs entirely to me. I worked part-time at a small accounting office near campus. Filing documents, answering phones, entering data. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid enough to keep me afloat. Most nights, dinner was instant noodles or something cheap from the grocery store. I tracked every dollar. I stretched every paycheck. It was hard. But it was honest. And more importantly, it was mine. I didn't call home. My parents called me. Every few months, my mom would leave a voicemail, always sounding the same, soft, fragile, carefully constructed. Natalie, honey, we don't understand what we did wrong. Your father's been so upset. We just want our family back. Every time I listened to one of those messages, something inside me tightened. Because a small part of me still wanted to believe her. A small part of me wondered if maybe I had overreacted. Maybe I should go back. Maybe I should try harder. But I never did. Instead, I deleted the messages and went back to studying. Sophomore year, I decided I wanted my own place. Nothing big, just a 1-bedroom apartment where I didn't have to share space or schedules or noise. Somewhere quiet. Somewhere I could breathe. I found a place in Tempe, nothing fancy but clean, close enough to campus, within my budget if I kept working extra hours. I filled out the application, handed over my paperwork, and waited. 3 days later, the property manager called. "I'm sorry, Natalie," she said, her tone polite but distant, "your application has been denied." I frowned, sitting on the edge of my bed with my laptop still open. Denied? Why? "There are some issues with your credit history," she replied. "I can't go into full detail, but I recommend pulling your credit report." I felt my stomach drop. My credit history? I repeated. That doesn't make sense. I don't have any credit. She paused briefly. I'd still recommend checking. The call ended. I sat there for a while, staring at my phone. I had never opened a credit card. Never taken out a loan. Never borrowed money from anyone. There shouldn't have been anything on my record at all. I told myself it had to be a mistake. A mix-up. A system error. A common name issue. I was 19 years old, juggling classes, work, and everything else that came with trying to build a life from scratch. I didn't have the time or the energy to chase something that didn't make sense. So I let it go. I found another apartment. Cheaper. Smaller. No credit check required. And I moved on. That was my first mistake. But I wouldn't understand that for years. Time passes the way it does when you're busy surviving. One semester turned into another. Then another. I graduated with a degree in finance and a job offer already lined up before commencement. A junior analyst position at a mid-sized financial consulting firm in downtown Phoenix. The office was modern, all glass walls and clean lines, the kind of place where people spoke in measured tones and expected results without excuses. I fit in there. Not immediately, not easily, but steadily. I worked longer hours than I needed to. I double-checked every report, triple-checked every number. I built a reputation quietly, the same way I had done everything else in my life. Within 2 years, I was promoted. Within 4, I was a senior analyst. By 26, I had my own apartment. A reliable car. A growing savings account. On paper, my life looked exactly like what success was supposed to be. But every Christmas, I sat alone. I'd cook something small, chicken, vegetables, maybe a glass of wine, and sit by the window, watching the desert sky fade into evening, thinking about the house on Desert Willow Lane. Not with longing. Not really. More like pressing on a bruise to see if it still hurts. It always did. I didn't talk to Jason. Not once in those 9 years. Every time I thought about him, the same image surfaced. The backyard. The string lights. That short, awkward laugh when Dad told me to stop begging for attention. He hadn't defended me. He hadn't said anything at all. And in the absence of anything else, silence becomes its own kind of answer. I built a life that didn't include them. And I told myself that was enough. But there's a difference between enough and whole. I didn't understand that yet. I didn't understand it until a phone call came through on a Thursday night in late January, 9 years after I left, and changed everything I thought I knew. I was sitting on my couch with my laptop open, reviewing a quarterly report. The apartment was quiet, the only sound coming from the soft hum of the heater. My phone buzzed on the coffee table. Unknown number. I almost ignored it. I always ignored unknown numbers. But something about the time, late enough that most people weren't calling casually, made me hesitate. So I picked it up. Hello? For a second, there was nothing but breathing. Uneven. Shallow. Then a voice, cracked and barely holding together. Natalie. It's Jason. My hand tightened around the phone. I hadn't heard his voice in nearly a decade. But this didn't sound like the person I remembered. Where are you? I asked, standing up without even realizing I was moving. A shaky exhale came through the line. Gas station, off Route 60, outside Phoenix. I walked toward the window, my heart starting to beat faster. Why are you there? There was a pause. Long enough that I thought the call had dropped. Then he said it. They kicked me out. The words didn't make sense at first. Not immediately. Jason was my favorite. Jason was the scholarship, the banner, the celebration. Jason was the one they chose. What do you mean they kicked you out? I asked. I can't explain everything over the phone, he said, his voice breaking slightly. I need somewhere to go tonight. Please. That last word didn't sound like him at all. Not the version of him I remembered. I leaned my forehead lightly against the window, staring out into the dark. Why aren't you at home? I asked quietly. Silence again. Then, almost in a whisper, he said. Because I'm not useful anymore. That sentence settled somewhere deep in my chest. I didn't respond right away. I just grabbed my keys from the counter and headed for the door. Stay where you are, I said. I'm coming. I didn't know yet what he was about to tell me. I didn't know that the version of my parents I had carried with me for 9 years was only part of the story. But I was about to find out. I grabbed my coat and keys, barely taking the time to shut my laptop before heading out the door. The night air hit me the second I stepped outside, cool and still, the kind of quiet that makes everything feel sharper. I got into my car, started the engine, and pulled out of the parking lot with my phone still in my hand. Stay on the line, I said. Jason didn't answer right away. I could hear movement on his end, a car passing, the distant hum of traffic, the faint buzz of fluorescent lights you only really notice at places like gas stations late at night. I'm here, he said finally, his voice lower now, like he was trying to hold it together. I merged onto the main road, my headlights cutting through the dark. What happened? I asked. For a few seconds, all I heard was his breathing. Then he started talking. Not in full sentences. Not in a clean explanation. Just fragments, like he was pulling pieces out of something he hadn't fully processed yet. I lost the contract, 3 months ago, he said. What contract? My sponsorship deal, the training program I was in after college. It fell through. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel. Jason had built his entire identity around basketball. After the scholarship, after college, everything had been about going further, training programs, opportunities, connections. What do you mean it fell through? They said I wasn't progressing fast enough, he said, his voice flat now. Performance issues. They cut me. I didn't respond immediately. Not because I didn't have anything to say, but because I didn't know how to say it without sounding like I was pointing out something obvious. What did Mom and Dad say? I asked. A short, hollow laugh came through the phone. You already know what they said. I did. But I needed to hear it. He said I embarrassed the family, Jason continued. Said people had expectations. Said I had one job and I couldn't even do that right. I exhaled slowly, my eyes fixed on the road ahead. And Mom? She didn't say anything at first, he said. Just stood there like always. Then later she told me maybe I should have had a backup plan. Like it was that simple. The words hung there for a moment. Then he added, quieter. I tried to stay. I really did. I thought maybe if I just figured something out quickly, got another opportunity, they'd calm down. I turned onto the highway, the road stretching out in front of me, empty and dark. But they didn't, I said. No, he replied. They didn't. There was a pause. They gave me 2 weeks, he continued. Said I needed to get back on track or I couldn't stay there. And? I didn't, he said simply. The honesty in his voice caught me off guard. Not defensive. Not exaggerated. Just tired. They told me to pack my things this morning, he said. Dad said people were already asking questions. Said it wasn't a good look having me around with nothing going on. I felt something tighten in my chest, something that felt familiar in a way I didn't expect. They told people you were traveling for training, I said quietly. Yeah, he replied. That's what they told everyone. I nodded to myself, even though he couldn't see it. Of course they did. Appearance first. Always. And when that stopped working, I began. They stopped pretending, he finished. We drove in silence for a few seconds. Then he said something that made my grip on the wheel tighten just a little more. They didn't just choose me, Natalie, he said. They chose what I represented. I didn't answer. Because I understood exactly what he meant. They loved me as long as I fit the picture, he continued. The second I didn't, I became you. That landed harder than anything else he'd said so far. I didn't argue with it. I didn't soften it. I just let it sit there between us. How long have you been at the gas station? I asked after a moment. Couple hours, he said. I didn't know who else to call. I glanced at the clock on my dashboard. 1:18 a.m. I'm about 15 minutes out, I said. Stay inside where it's warm. Okay. I could hear him shifting again, maybe moving toward the door. Then, more quietly, he said. Nat? Yeah. I'm sorry. The words came out quickly, like he'd been holding them back for a long time and didn't trust himself to say them slowly. I didn't respond right away. I let the apology sit there, not because I didn't hear it, but because I needed a second to figure out what it meant. About the party, he added. That night. I should have said something. I kept my eyes on the road. The memory came back instantly. The lights. The voices. That laugh. I didn't think it was a big deal, he said. I thought you were just being dramatic. That's what they always said. I nodded again, more to myself than to him. I know, I said. There was no anger in my voice. Not because I didn't feel it, but because it had already been there, already burned through, already settled into something quieter. I believed them, he continued. For years. I thought you left because you couldn't handle not being the center of attention. I almost smiled at that. Almost. And now? I asked. Now there was a longer pause. Now I think I didn't see anything clearly, he said. I turned off the highway and followed the exit ramp toward the cluster of lights in the distance. The gas station came into view a few minutes later, glowing under bright white lights against the dark stretch of road around it. I pulled into the parking lot and parked near the entrance. Through the glass doors, I saw him immediately. Sitting on a plastic chair near the corner, a small duffel bag at his feet, his elbows resting on his knees, his head slightly bowed. He looked different. Not just tired. Smaller. Like something had been stripped away that he hadn't realized he depended on. I turned off the engine, the sudden silence inside the car making everything feel more real. Jason, I said into the phone, even though I could see him now. He looked up. Our eyes met through the glass. 9 years. 9 years of silence, distance, assumptions, and things left unsaid. I ended the call and stepped out of the car. The cold air hit my face again, sharper this time. I walked toward the entrance, pushed the door open, and stepped inside. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. For a second, we just looked at each other. I didn't hug him. I wasn't there yet. But I nodded once toward the door behind me. Let's go, I said. He picked up his bag without arguing. We walked back out to the car in silence. The kind of silence that isn't empty, just full of things that haven't been unpacked yet. He put his bag in the back seat and got in on the passenger side. I started the engine again and pulled out of the parking lot. For the first few minutes, neither of us spoke. The road stretched ahead, quiet and open. Then, just as I thought we might stay in that silence all the way back, he said it. There's something else. I glanced at him briefly before looking back at the road. What? He hesitated. Not like before. This was different. Careful. Measured. It's about money, he said. My stomach tightened slightly. What about money? He leaned back in his seat, staring straight ahead now. I found something before I left, he said. In Dad's office. That got my attention. Our dad's office had always been off limits growing up. Closed door. No entry. No questions. What did you find? I asked. He exhaled slowly. A folder, he said. At the back of his desk. Full of documents. What kind of documents? He turned his head slightly toward me, his expression serious now in a way I hadn't seen before. The kind that don't make sense until they suddenly do, he said. I felt that same quiet tension building again, the kind that signals something bigger is coming. What was in it, Jason? He hesitated one more time. Then he said, things with our names on them. My hand stayed steady on the wheel. But something inside me shifted. I didn't know it yet, but whatever was in that folder was about to explain something I had dismissed years ago. Something I should have never ignored. The rest of the drive felt different after that. Quieter, but heavier. Jason didn't rush to explain, and I didn't push him right away. Something about the way he said it, careful, measured, told me this wasn't something you just blurt out between traffic lights. We pulled into my apartment complex 20 minutes later. The lot was mostly empty, a few cars scattered under dim lights. I parked, turned off the engine, and for a second neither of us moved. Come inside, I said finally. He nodded, grabbed his bag, and followed me upstairs. Inside, the apartment was exactly the way I had left it, clean, quiet, controlled. A space that made sense. Jason stepped in and paused for a second, like he was taking it all in. This is nice, he said. Yeah, I replied simply, setting my keys on the counter. It's mine. That word hung there for a second longer than the rest. Mine. I grabbed an extra blanket from the closet and set it on the couch. You can stay here tonight, I said. We'll figure everything else out tomorrow. Thanks, he said, his voice quieter now, more grounded. I nodded and walked into the kitchen, pouring 2 glasses of water and setting one in front of him on the coffee table. He sat down slowly, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees, the same posture I'd seen at the gas station. I sat across from him. For a moment, we just looked at each other. 2 people who used to live in the same house, now sitting in a space that had no connection to that life at all. Tell me about the folder, I said. He exhaled slowly, rubbing his hands together like he was trying to warm them up even though the room wasn't cold. It was in the bottom drawer of Dad's desk, he began. Behind a stack of old files. I only found it because I was looking for my birth certificate. I didn't interrupt. It was thick, he continued. Not just 1 or 2 papers. A lot. And organized, like he knew exactly what was in there. What kind of papers? I asked again, more focused this time. Jason looked up at me. Credit card applications, he said. I felt my chest tighten slightly. Okay, I said carefully. And? They had names on them, he continued. Our names. My stomach dropped. How many? 5 that I saw, he said. 3 under your name. 2 under mine. I sat back slightly, trying to process that. That doesn't make sense, I said. I've never opened a credit card. Not one. I know, he replied. And you? He shook his head. No. The room felt quieter now. Not peaceful quiet. The kind of quiet that comes right before something clicks into place. When were they opened? I asked. Jason swallowed once. Right after we both turned 18, he said. Within months. My mind moved quickly, pulling up timelines without even trying. 18. That was the same year I left. The same year everything changed. What were they used for? I asked, my voice steady even though something inside me wasn't. Jason let out a slow breath. Everything, he said. Tuition payments. Car expenses. The kitchen remodel. That new patio they put in a few years ago. He paused. And the party, he added quietly. I stared at him. What party? He looked at me like he wasn't sure how to say it without making it worse. The graduation party, he said. The one they threw for me. My grip tightened slightly on the edge of the couch. All of it, he continued. The catering, the decorations, the banner, it was charged to one of the cards under your name. For a second, I didn't say anything. I couldn't. Because suddenly, something from years ago came rushing back. The apartment application. The phone call. Your credit history shows some irregularities. I had told myself it was a mistake. A system error. Something small. It wasn't. That's why my application got denied, I said slowly. Jason nodded. Yeah, he said. That's exactly why. I leaned back, staring at the ceiling for a second as everything started to line up in a way that felt both clear and overwhelming. How much? I asked. Jason hesitated. Rough estimate, he said. Across all 5 accounts, over 100,000. The number sat there between us. Heavy. Real. And they signed everything? I asked. He nodded again. Signatures don't match ours, he said. But the names are ours. Social security numbers too. I closed my eyes for a second. 10 years. 10 years of working, saving, being careful, building something from nothing. While my name had been carrying debt I didn't even know existed. I opened my eyes again. Do you still have the documents? I asked. Jason nodded immediately this time. I took pictures of everything, he said. And I grabbed the originals before I left. Where are they? He pointed toward his bag. In there. I looked at the bag, then back at him. And in that moment, something inside me shifted again. Not like it did at the party. Not quiet. Not sad. Clear. Focused. They didn't just ignore me, I said slowly. They didn't just choose you over me. Jason didn't interrupt. They used me, I continued. My name. My identity. To build the life they wanted. He nodded once. They did it to both of us, he said. That part hit differently. Because for the first time, this wasn't about who they loved more. This wasn't about favoritism. This was about something else entirely. Control. Image. And whatever it took to maintain both. I stood up and walked into the kitchen, my mind already moving ahead. What are you doing? Jason asked. I'm getting my laptop, I said. I brought it back, set it on the table, and opened it. What time is it? He asked. Late, I said. Doesn't matter. I started typing. What are you looking for? My credit report, I said. All 3 bureaus. Jason leaned back slightly, watching me. You think it's still active? He asked. I think it's been active for years, I replied. The page loaded slowly. Each second felt longer than it should have. Finally, the report appeared. I scanned it once. Then again. Then a third time, slower. 3 accounts. All under my name. All tied to an address I knew too well. Desert Willow Lane. Opened the same year I left. Balances still there. Not small. Not insignificant. Real. I didn't say anything at first. I just turned the screen slightly toward Jason. He leaned forward, reading. Then he exhaled slowly. Yeah, he said. That matches what I saw. I stared at the numbers. Not shocked anymore. Not confused. Just certain. I need to make a call tomorrow, I said. Jason looked at me. A lawyer? I nodded. This isn't just wrong, I said. It's a crime. He didn't argue. He didn't hesitate. He just nodded once. And in that moment, sitting there in my apartment with the truth finally laid out in front of us, one thing became clear in a way it never had before. The story I thought I had lived through was only part of what really happened. The next morning didn't feel like a normal morning. It felt like the start of something I couldn't undo. I woke up earlier than usual, not because I had somewhere to be, but because my mind wouldn't let me stay asleep. The numbers from the credit report were still sitting there in my head, clear and exact, like they had been carved into something permanent overnight. $68,000 under my name. 10 years. 10 years of damage I didn't even know existed. I got out of bed, walked into the living room, and found Jason already awake, sitting on the couch with his elbows on his knees, staring at nothing in particular. Neither of us said good morning. We didn't need to. Everything we needed to say was already sitting between us. I'm pulling the full reports again, I said, heading toward the kitchen. He nodded. I'll grab the documents. We worked in silence at first. I opened my laptop and pulled all 3 credit reports, Equifax, Experian, TransUnion, going through each one carefully this time, not just scanning, but reading every detail. Jason laid the folder out on the table. It was exactly how he described it. Organized. Labeled. Clean in a way that made it worse, not better. 5 applications. 3 in my name. 2 in his. All opened within months of our 18th birthdays. All tied to the same address. All listing my mom's phone number as the contact. I picked up one of the applications, holding it steady in my hands. The signature wasn't mine. Not even close. But the name was. And that was enough. Jason ran his own credit. 2 weeks passed, and for a while, it felt almost quiet. Not peaceful quiet. The kind of quiet that comes before something breaks open. I followed everything Daniel Whitaker told us to do. I went to work, kept my routines, answered emails, sat through meetings, and came home like nothing in my life was unraveling behind the scenes. Jason stayed with me, keeping mostly to himself, applying for jobs, trying to rebuild something steady from nothing. We didn't talk about our parents every day. We didn't have to. What needed to be done was already in motion. The affidavit had been filed. The police report submitted. The disputes sent to all 3 credit bureaus. There was nothing left to decide. Only what would happen next. Then the first crack appeared. It didn't come from a lawyer. It didn't come from the police. It came from someone who had been watching quietly for years. Mrs. Evelyn Carter. She called me on a Tuesday evening. "Natalie," she said, her voice steady but carrying something underneath it, "I need to tell you something." I stepped out onto my balcony, closing the door behind me. "What is it?" "Your parents spoke at the church meeting on Sunday," she said. There were about 30 people there. I already knew where this was going. "What did they say?" She didn't soften it. "Your father stood up during open sharing," she said, "and told the group that you've been manipulating Jason into cutting off the family. He said you've always been jealous and that you're using his situation to turn him against them." I closed my eyes for a moment. "Of course he did. Your mother sat beside him and cried the entire time," she added. "Said she hasn't slept in weeks." I could picture it perfectly. The posture. The tone. The performance. Some people believed them, Mrs. Carter continued. But not everyone. I leaned against the railing. "I'm not surprised," I said. "I know," she replied. "But I want you to hear this from me. Truth has a way of surfacing. Don't let them rewrite your story." "I won't," I said. And this time, I meant it without hesitation. Later that night, I got 2 messages. One from someone I vaguely remembered from church. "How could you do this to your parents?" Another from a number I didn't recognize. "Your mother is heartbroken. You should be ashamed." I stared at both messages for a few seconds. Then I deleted them. Not because they didn't matter, but because they weren't mine to carry anymore. The next morning, I called Whitaker. "I'm ready to move forward fully," I said. There was a brief pause. "Once we proceed," he said, "there's no going back." "I understand," I replied. "Then we file everything officially," he said. "Do it." After that, things didn't explode all at once. They shifted. Slowly. Quietly. But undeniably. My parents' world didn't collapse in a single moment. It unraveled piece by piece. People started asking questions. Not loudly. Not publicly. But privately. Conversations changed. Distances formed. The same neighbors who once filled our backyard stopped calling. The same church members who had praised my parents for years began to step back, not with confrontation, but with silence. And silence, I had learned, can say more than anything else. 3 weeks later, Whitaker called. "They've retained an attorney," he said. "They want to negotiate." I sat down at my kitchen table. "What are they offering?" "Full acknowledgement of the fraudulent accounts," he said. "Restitution of all balances, just over $115,000. Structured repayment plan." I let that number sit for a second. "And in return?" I asked. "They're asking that you support a plea agreement rather than pursuing full prosecution," he said. "No prison time. Probation. Financial restrictions." I looked over at Jason. He was sitting across the room, watching me, waiting. "What does that mean for us?" I asked. "Your credit gets cleared," Whitaker said. The accounts are removed. Your financial records are restored. That was all I needed to hear. Accept it, I said. The paperwork took another month. No courtroom drama. No public spectacle. Just signatures. Statements. Admissions. Mark and Elaine Harper pleaded guilty to identity theft. No prison time. But the truth was no longer something they could hide behind appearances. Within 60 days, every fraudulent account disappeared from my credit report. Every number that didn't belong to me was gone. My score jumped almost 200 points in less than 6 months. For the first time in my adult life, my name actually belonged to me. I didn't celebrate loudly. I didn't need to. The result spoke for itself. Jason stayed with me for 3 months. Those months weren't perfect. We argued sometimes. We sat in silence other times. But slowly, something real started to form between us. Not the version of a relationship our parents had controlled. Something honest. One night, sitting at the kitchen table, I asked him the question I had held onto for years. Why didn't you say anything that night? He didn't answer right away. He just stared at his hands. Because I believed them, he said finally. I thought you were the problem. That's what they told me for years. I nodded. I know, I said. I was wrong, he added. I didn't rush to forgive him. But I didn't push him away either. Just be honest now, I said. That's enough. He nodded. And for the first time, it actually felt like it was. By spring, he had a job. Nothing flashy. A position with a local training facility, helping younger athletes build the kind of discipline he had once relied on. He moved into his own apartment not long after. 15 minutes away from mine. We started having dinner together once a week. No pressure. No expectations. Just choice. 6 months later, I received another call. This time, it was from my firm. I had been nominated for a Regional Analyst Award. I attended the ceremony alone. Or at least, I thought I would. When I looked out into the audience before my name was called, I saw 2 familiar faces sitting side by side. Jason. And Mrs. Carter. She had flown in just for that night. When they announced my name, I walked up to the stage, the lights warm against my face, the room filled with people I didn't need to impress anymore. I kept my speech simple. Years ago, someone told me I was begging for attention, I said. For a long time, I believed that. Tonight, I don't need attention. I just needed the chance to stand here and earn this. The applause came, steady and real. And when I looked out again, Jason was clapping. Not awkwardly. Not out of obligation. But fully. And Mrs. Carter stood, just like she had at my graduation years ago. That moment felt different. Not because it was louder. But because it was real. Months later, a letter arrived. My father's handwriting. Careful. Controlled. I opened it slowly. He didn't start with an apology. He started with an explanation. About his past. About failure. About image. And then, at the end, he wrote this. I see you now. I read it twice. Then I folded it and placed it in my drawer. I didn't respond. Not out of anger. But because I didn't need to. I wasn't waiting to be seen anymore. So here's where I am now. I'm 27. I have my own apartment, a career I built from nothing, and a life that belongs entirely to me. Jason lives nearby. We see each other because we choose to. Not because someone is managing the relationship behind the scenes. As for my parents, they exist in the distance now. Not erased. Not forgiven completely. But no longer in control of anything that defines me. If there's anything I've learned, it's this. If someone only values you when you fit their version of success, that's not love. That's a condition. And you are allowed to walk away from conditions you never agreed to. Setting a boundary is not betrayal. It's not selfish. It's not cruel. It's the moment you decide that your life belongs to you. I spent years thinking I needed permission to take that back. I didn't. And neither do you. If this story meant something to you, take a second to subscribe to Women Reddit Stories and share your own experience in the comments. I read every single one. Because sometimes, the most important thing you can realize is that you were never begging for attention. You were just asking the wrong people to see you.